What's up, everybody? This is Grant at Cause Artist. Welcome to episode 86 of the Disruptors for Good podcast. Today, we're going to speak with Tim Hollinger, the co-founder of Bathing Culture, on using no new plastic to create their line of natural and sustainable bathing products. Amazing conversation. Hope you enjoy it. Have a great day. Have a great week. We'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye. So usually how I like to start these conversations is really about an individual's journey and really a brand's journey for being created. I mean, usually it takes a really long time for somebody to figure out, what they want to do, and starting a company and a brand is a big decision. A lot of time, a lot of money is going to go into it. It's a big life decision. So we had spoke a little bit earlier about how you and your partner Spencer had met up. So let's talk about like really truly early days of how you guys met in general.
I love this question. There's so many places to start, Grant. It's amazing. But so yeah, the story of how I got to be kind of this co-founder of the company Bathing Culture, this national brand that's really shaping a conversation around personal care using organic ingredients, making sure those ingredients are biodegradable, that it's refillable, really a brand with integrity that is helping both personal and planetary health, but also bringing a lot of joy to people in how they shower. So it's like that they're all of these different threads that have fed into this journey that got me there. And a lot of it, I mean, we go all the way back to when I was in school, and I hated school. I thought the system was really like stupid. I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm a kid. I want to be outside. I want to be in nature. I want to be running around. And I'm super dyslexic. And I would spend as little amount of time in school as possible as a kid. And I would just go home. I would beg my mom. I'd be like, oh, I'm sick, Mom. Or I would leave school. And I had this big vegetable garden. I was always outside. I grew up in rural New England, and I would go out. I would get out of school, and I had this vegetable garden. I would grow vegetables. And this is like, even I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I would pack up a wagon and just drag the wagon around and drop off vegetables at different people's houses around the neighborhood and get money for them. And then I had like a snow blowing business. And then I started painting houses when I was like 13 and with like a bunch of buddies, and was always kind of doing this stuff. And, it made me really think about like, hey, there are opportunities out here. I always had this drive to kind of find things that worked. And at the same time, I was really kind of my experience in school where I was like, why is this, like, why do we learn like this? Like, why is someone like telling me what to do? Really made me like question everything. And I think like taking things for granted has always been something. It's like, hey, like why is this system the way that we do things, or why is this? So anyway, the school stuff, I wasn't doing great in school, and so I got sent to a special school for dyslexic kids. And it was a really cool opportunity because I got to see all of these other folks who maybe they couldn't read very well or spell very well, but just had like incredible brains. And really just like the idea of neural diversity, and that, there are so many different ways to do things, has always been something that's just been so cool, so exciting to me. But so there I met Spencer, who's my co-founder. Ended up, we ended up getting really close. Kind of, we were roommates for 3 years. And then the two of us went in different directions. The school was really good. It was called Kildonan. It's since closed down. But we actually both got to a point where we were able to get into college.
Wow.
So both of us went to college, and he went out to Colorado and became a ski bum, and I went to upstate New York. And something that I had always really loved, and I think it was because reading had been so hard for me. Like, I loved listening. Yeah, it's like podcast. Like, I love podcasts. Like, this stuff's so great. But so I'd listen to the radio a lot, and my dream job had been to work in radio for National Public Radio. That was that was it for me. I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. And so there was a college radio station, and I ended up getting a job there. And then I was able to kind of wiggle my way into working for the local NPR affiliate news station.
Oh, nice.
And so while I was in college, I was working for this NPR station, and it was fascinating. I mean, I got to interview, governors and all different sorts of folks, and I really loved it. But I also felt like I was on the sideline.
Mm.
Like I
Okay.
felt like it was just like you're just watching things happen or
Mm.
telling people what's going on. And I really felt like the way to have a huge impact was right now at this time in history was through business and through kind of the impact and the power that they have,
Right.
which is also a little problematic. You
Sure,
have a lot of
sure,
folks who
sure.
are like from NGOs and doing this amazing charitable work on the podcast, and I'm in such awe of that work and what that takes and the rewards. But yeah, so I went and I was like, all right, green technology, that's the thing. So I
Mm.
started working for a green technology startup, and we were selling light bulbs,
Okay.
LED light bulbs.
Sure.
So we'd do these big retrofits, and it was so weird because we'd do like coal mines and like big like oil rig, like the types of industry that was
Interesting.
interested in it, because the wholesale would be from a cost savings perspective, not from an environmental
Mm.
perspective. And so I was really about the environmental aspect,
But that's great
and
when you can
then
do both, right? You can serve both, cost effective and
yeah,
environmental effective. That's the dream product.
yeah, yeah. It really was, and I mean we were doing great too, and it also kind of taught me too that a lot of the way to get, as much as I have this passion or we have this passion for putting the environment first in a lot of these things, or people and planet first, a lot of people are just not there and
Hmm.
aren't going to be able to think about it that way or justify things that way.
Sure.
And so things have to make sense economically as well, which I think was a really important lesson that I've carried forward. But yeah, so did that, and I was like, wow, business is so easy. The people who are running this business are like, not very competent. So I left and I tried to start a startup, and it was a disaster and it failed. And I was like, oh well, like that was just a fluke. People say, fail fast and keep trying, and so I tried to start another startup, and that failed. um, and I like flailed for a little bit, and I mean I still flail, but I kind of came away. I tried to do a startup that was kind of fun. It was essentially like healthy Lunchables, so
Sure.
farm
Oh
to
yeah,
school
man.
table,
Yeah, yeah.
bread meals, and that was really cool. That it has legs. It's still a great idea, but I mean the two highest liability areas that you're going to see are businesses with kids and businesses with food.
Hmm.
And like
Hmm.
combining those two
Yeah.
things, along with like having zero experience in both of those areas, is just was not a good formula. But so boy, yeah, I feel like you must be regretting that you asked this question. I'm not. I'm
Hey,
like,
no. So when I guess it's
chapter
always
three.
it's always interesting to, like you said, you kind of played around in a bunch of different sectors, right? But then
Yeah.
as what was it about the sort of bath, shaving, sort of this cleanliness sort of sector that really got your attention? Was it Spencer? Because as you mentioned before, I think give a little background on him. You said he was one of the first employees at Rothy's, which is a really big sort of global shoe brand at this point. Did he come to you after his time there and saying, hey, I think we can do something like this in a different sector? Did you go to him and say, hey, I've been doing some research, here's what I see? How'd that sort of
Yeah.
come together to actually start Baiting
Totally.
culture?
Well, so yeah, I after the kind of healthy Lunchables
Yeah.
debacle, I was like, all right, I got to go work with some people who anyone can start a business.
Yeah.
Grant, you and I, we could go down
Sure.
to City Hall and file some paperwork today, and boom, it's done. It can even sound great on paper, but not many people can scale an organization. And so I was really like reflecting on kind of some of my failures. I was like, or not even failures, but learnings. So it's like, I need to learn how to scale something. And so I went and I joined a technology startup in San Francisco with a team of people. I really selected it for the team that had, built several products and had brought them to market and had done that. And, it's kind of funny because that company also failed, and then the group started another company that I stayed on for that ended up doing well. But so it was like another layer of learnings there. But so while I was there, Spencer was living in San Francisco. When I got to San Francisco, he was working in commercial finance.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the craziest thing ever, because this guy, I mean, if you've met, like he is such an artist. And, he was like, had been, a really in Japanese ski magazines. He plays the cello, just this very kind of, this guy, and the commercial financing didn't really match.
Right.
He was like, I don't want to be doing this. So he quit his job and he went hiking. He was over in like the Himalayas for like a year. He went and lived in Japan. And he came back and he was like, I want to do something with you. Like, we should do a business together. You're so interested in this. And he had seen just in the Himalayas, like there's a lot of trash burning. Like the sanitation's really bad.
Sure.
You'd be in these beautiful places and it's just, smogged in, or people are kind of burning chip bags or whatever. And it's like, man, you can't go anywhere without kind of seeing this stuff. And so he and I kind of started talking about, different opportunities. And at that point he was like, you know what, I can't wait for you, Tim. I'm going to go join this company, Rothy's.
Gotcha.
And so he got on he started at Rothy's. He was actually there. They brought him in as kind of a jack of all trades, but he quickly became head of sustainability there.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really fascinating, because he was working there, and then we would meet and we would be talking and we'd say, hey, what are the areas where people really can have a big impact? It's like, as individuals, as consumers, sometimes it feels kind of like powerless, like some of our decisions don't make a really big like impact. And something we kept coming back to over and over again was, the products that we use every day. And, we would go on these epic adventures. We would be, biking up in the mountains around San Francisco and going climbing and a lot of surfing, and we'd be out there and it would just be this incredible experience. And there were a couple of hikes we would go on that would take us to hot springs. So you'd go out, you'd hike like 10 miles and you'd get to like hop in a hot spring. And
that'll change your perspective a ton when you see like a beautiful like hot spring. There's some in like southern Missouri and northern Arkansas, very just hidden gems of like just beautiful hot springs, man. And once you see that, like, it's just things just change, right? You just understand like the beauty of nature in a whole nother way.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that we would have these incredible experiences. We would go out, and even like surfing, we'd be like, wow, like, why can't I have this feeling when I'm in the shower? Why can't I, I go out, I have this like incredible natural experience, and then I go home and I take a shower, and, I was doing these really long trail runs, and I would get home and just the products that you'd use in the shower, you flip the label on that stuff, and it's like, you can't recognize any of the ingredients. You start Googling it, and it's just the cancer risks, the environmental risks. It's really heartbreaking, the ingredients that go into these everyday products. And then the deeper that you start looking into that stuff, I think everyone's awareness now has grown around kind of the packaging problems.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
But one of the things that really is staggering about most of the products that you see in your shower or next to your sink or in your medicine cabinet, a lot of them aren't biodegradable. Or if they are, it will take decades, if not generations, for those ingredients to break down. And that's even some ingredients that are derived from natural things or plants, just the way that they're synthesized. And so we really started, the more we learned about it, the more concerned we were. And, the third leading cause of smog in the United States is from personal care products. When things wash down the drain, they get into the ocean. It's part of the water cycle. So it's not just the packaging. So we were kind of like, wow, people, there's nothing, that the only products that really meet our needs in this space are really crunchy, like really,
Yeah, it's a good
really,
call.
like super hippie, older, just like not meshing on a brand
Yep.
perspective, or really shaming too.
Good
And
call. Yeah.
we really felt that, in order to get people excited about using environmentally friendly products, they have to bring people a lot of joy and not shame people. And then also give people an incredible experience,
Yeah.
not only from effectiveness and quality, but really like transport people. And so in the products that we make today at Bathing Culture, uh, we're like, we're very interested in like, hey, how can we transport people to a redwood grove? How can we give people that feeling of riding a wave at sunrise? And so really taking a lot of that Northern California sensibility and sharing that and the joy of that, and saying like, hey, the world's and our experiences as individuals and as communities in the world are incredibly beautiful things and incredibly joyful and exciting things. And let's protect that and celebrate that with the products that we use every day, and make sure that they're not creating any harm.
Yeah, and it was is that the big reason of using sort of these glass bottles, right, and these refillable sort of ideas where you're going to run out of something, right? Everybody's going to run out of shampoo or bathing washing soap, whatever it may be. Was that an easy step to take? Is just not sort of try not to use obviously plastic containers through the product line?
Yeah, it's hard
Yeah, I know.
because there are a
Yeah.
lot of there are a lot of trade-offs, and when you start to do kind of analysis of like
Hmm.
full life cycle analysis of different materials,
Hmm.
there are trade-offs, and a lot of how we think about it is making sure that we are on the right path and that we are helping change how people are thinking about using these products. Even bar soap versus liquid soap, or liquid shampoo versus bar shampoo. There's a lot of conversation around these things, but when you look at kind of the numbers and the reality of things, and this goes back a little bit too to what I was saying earlier about how you need to make sure that it makes economic sense, or that there's like the need there. By volume, liquid body wash is the most sold personal care product in the US, and that's liquid. And so if you come in with like a bar, it's like, okay, like some people will use that, but you're missing the vast majority of the industry, and or of what people are looking for. So for us, it was very much like, okay, like the number one thing people are demanding, the options that are there are problematic. Let's provide something that fixes that problem, and then let's continue to push that. And so for us, we started with plastic bottles, and it was the biggest investment we had to take. I took essentially like my life savings and
Oh.
bought recycled plastic for the
Hmm.
bottles.
Hmm.
And it was crazy. We had this experience where we had to talk to so many people. I mean, we must have talked to 20 different companies. I had so many people telling us like, so we were like, okay, like we need 100% recycled plastic bottles made from California plastic that we put in the recycling bin and comes back
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah.
And I'd say 7 plastic industry executives say, there is absolutely no way that you can do that. That is crazy. You can't get 100%. It won't work. The quality will be bad. It's going to throw off the product. And we just kept pushing and kept asking, and all of this stuff. And eventually we found some people that would do it for us, and they thought it was a really bad idea too. They were like, yeah, we'll make these for you, but you need to buy essentially like a tractor trailer full of these
Right.
bottles.
Yeah.
And at that time we're selling like, maybe 100. Like we're like, wait, how much of this do we need to sell? Like there's no way. And so we started with those bottles, and it was really interesting. I mean, the things you learn through these
Yeah.
processes too, like so many people, you'll see bottles and it'll say, oh, made with recycled material.
Yeah.
And so often, it's like 1%,
Sure.
even like less than 1%. It's gotten a little better over the last 3 years, but it's still a total mess. And with kind of the current recycling crisis, where most recycling is ending up in the landfill, a lot of the discussion needs to be about reusing and reducing rather than just saying like, hey, this particular bottle can be remade over and over and over again. And so that really drove us into glass. And glass is challenging too because it's really heavy. So if you're shipping it anywhere, the
Good
carbon
call. Yeah.
cost is really high, and we're carbon neutral, so we offset like all of our carbon, but it costs us a lot of money
Sure.
to do
Yeah.
that.
No doubt.
And so we really try and encourage people like, hey, let this be the last bottle that you buy. Especially like on the closures and things too. If you have a pump, we're just like, hey, reuse that over and over again. And what we ended up doing is setting up refills all over the country so people can take bottles in, and it's less impact for us to send a gallon or 5 gallons all together, so that people can go to an individual store and get a refill.
Is that mostly in California?
Yeah, it's mostly in California. It's been really interesting because it we launched it about a year ago, and immediately we were doing refills in about 100
Wow,
locations.
that's a lot.
Yeah, we were really surprised. Like, the demand was just like boom, like everyone wants refills. It's a big
Mhm.
thing, and people, it's so cool. I mean, so many people are opening refill stores
Yeah.
and kind of rethinking grocery as well, and just like saying like, hey, like we can have this elevated and
Yeah.
reduce materials. But so we did that. We got it out, and then COVID hit, and so a lot of
Sure.
places kind of closed down or put the brakes on things. But we've been surprised this all through kind of the summer of 2020 and into the fall. The requests for refill setups have really continued to come in.
Yeah.
And so that's been really exciting to kind of be in a position to expand that and help the more common that stuff becomes.
Yeah.
I think like the better that we're going to be environmentally, and getting more and more products to do that as well is really important.
Let's talk about scale a little bit and kind of, you said I thought it was really, really, really smart to kind of go work for that company that you knew had a team that know how to do that, right? So you can kind of learn and understand what that is. Because you're right, anybody can start a business, right? But it's the one thing that, Silicon Valley still has that another place doesn't have is the ability to scale companies, right? I mean, talent there. And now look, everybody, they're kind of in this remote world where you can assemble a team from anywhere, right? And kind of do certain things, but there's still, something about, physically like working with each other, right? And being around people. And I think it was so smart to do that as an individual, just to learn, right? To educate yourself. So what has it been like taking, skills from that time, learning that, and then taking it into bathing culture, scaling that up? What was those learnings look like, and what has worked for you guys, right? What has worked from the scaling and growth department for the company? Has it just been all
Yeah.
social, or has it been email? I mean, let's nerd out a little bit here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I think in terms of kind of key learnings, I think one of the things that I've taken away from kind of my varied career in different startups is really the thing that so many successful folks have in common is persistence. Really, just continuing to grind through challenges, and just like working through, like if things aren't working, like continue going, continue pushing. And that's really like a dangerous thing to know as well, because like there are times if I had stuck with healthy lunchables, I think I would have like
Gotta
gone
know you
bankrupt.
gotta know when to stop.
Like
For sure, it's a
yeah,
skill to
yeah.
know when to hang it up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the persistence is really like the big picture thing, where it's like if there's one thing that I've consistently learned, it's like you just keep going. But in terms of kind of like the more kind of like finer scale things, I think in any business, it's really important to have recurring revenue. So having a way that, you know getting a customer can be really hard. Getting that customer acquisition is never easy. And so if you have something where they're only going to buy it once from you, you have to do that process over and over and over and over again. And so I think that that's why there's a lot of like you see software companies where they have these recurring subscriptions, like my Spotify subscription and my, Netflix subscription, all of this stuff. They're just like, it's just rolling in every month. And it's not necessarily like a subscription, but it's like, hey, like what is something, how can a brand stay relevant and actually be needed? What is the service that that brand is providing? And I think that that's something we have to be thinking about in these conversations, is just like, what is the value that something is adding? In a more concrete way, I think tracking metrics is something that we do that I think a lot of folks don't fully recognize the importance of.
Yeah.
And even tracking those metrics like very early.
Yeah.
And so understanding like, okay, like what is it actually costing for us to acquire a customer right now? And how many of those customers are returning, and how frequently are they returning? And it's interesting because, like for some people, it's like, oh, like you want them to come back like every 2 months, like over and over and over. The products that we make are super concentrated.
Yeah.
So it's like we've got like a face and body oil, and it's like dual purpose too. And we sell it in a giant container for what it is, so that it has less environmental impact, and they're not, kind of on that
Right.
that treadmill of buying it again and again and again, where you can get 6 months of use after it. So we're more interested in not necessarily like, oh, are they buying something every 2 months, but it's like, are they here for their lifetime? Are we kind of getting them back? Are they trying these other products as well? And how can we constantly be improving against these metrics as well? What processes are working, what aren't? Another really big thing, I mean, transparency. We do open book management, so everyone can kind of see how things are looking, and that can be really scary as well too. If people are seeing the expenses, they're seeing how much we're bringing in, and helping folks kind of contextualize, hey, this is why, in an inventory business, you've got to make huge investments in all of the raw goods, and then you don't recoup that until later. But bringing in kind of, we have a small team, and bringing everyone into that process and kind of understanding how all of these pieces work together and are reliant on each other, has really helped create a shared sense of identity and ownership of the core team that we have.
Something we were talking about a little bit before we started recording was how to work with partnerships, right? And kind of, thinking about working with whether it's bigger brands, partnering with different companies in different sectors. And I thought it was interesting. You said you've turned down stuff, right? Big partnerships that you guys decided not to go to. So walk us through that process of maybe like partnerships that you've had before. How do you look at the industry as a whole, a very massive industry, right? And how do you want to disrupt that? Like you said, from maybe a B2B point of view and a manufacturing side, rather than just, B2C. There's definitely a B2B thing here that needs to be disrupted, from the supply chains and the use of products and ingredients and everything like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, most of the bad stuff, with products happens behind the scenes before things get to you. So like one small example, it's like we getting raw goods. You get these pallets of ingredients that come in, and they'll be wrapped in plastic. And it's just like the amount on a pallet, everyone's kind of seen this. Like you see a pallet and it's like wrapped in saran wrap. And there's like an inch of saran wrap like on those things. And so sometimes it's as easy, and I say easy because some of these conversations have been incredibly hard, but going to folks and saying like, hey, here's another way to wrap this pallet without plastic. Like you can actually get these boxes, and you use the box to put it everything in, and then you can kind of ratchet it down or use these straps. And so reducing a lot of waste, or just being smarter about materials. Having those conversations with folks, pushing different suppliers and saying like, hey, you know what, we'll pay a little bit more for this. And that's something that for us, and we've built a brand that has a lot of cachet, so people are excited to work with us. And we're also very intense about our environmental and sustainable lens that we put on everything. And also, it's not just the environment. It's people and planet, and people come first in a lot of that, both personal and planetary health. And so we'll ask folks, we'll ask our partners. I think when after the Black Lives Matter movement really gained a lot of renewed steam over the summer, we were talking to everyone we worked with and asking them, what is your response to this? What are you folks doing? What is your roadmap? And it was pretty surprising to us that almost everyone we talked to said that we were the only people that had asked them, kind of what they were doing about things.
Mm-hmm.
And we really take that approach with environmental
Mm-hmm.
things as well, where we'll
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, what is your environmental roadmap on things? How are you going to get to carbon neutral? And people will say, well, but we're thinking about it. And it's like, well, just show us your roadmap. Show us what you're really doing. And there are some national brands. So a lot of that's kind of on the supply chain side, and really making sure that the people that we're working for or working with are thinking about these things, or at least being pushed to think about these things, and then that they have plans. And if it's something that they're completely closed to, we'll find someone else. And we've had to do that a few times, where it's just
Wow.
like, if people really are not doing the work, we're not going to give them our business, because we know that kind of betrays what we're selling to our customers
Mm-hmm.
and our community. And I mean, a lot of on the supply chain as well, a big piece of it is just we use as many organic ingredients as possible. And so from a farm perspective, that's like a huge piece of it as well. It's like kind of having these certifications will do a lot of the vetting for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and also working with kind of trusted advice, like people who have worked in the industry, have worked on an organic certification for generations,
Right.
has
Right.
been a huge help. But on the kind of the retail side, or more the
Yeah.
consumer facing side, yeah, we've been approached by some massive household brands repeatedly, who have wanted to carry us. And one of them in particular, we ended up, they had a really beautiful kind of presentation about everything that they were doing for social justice, environmental justice, all of these things. But when we looked at their corporate contributions and donations, they were funding a lot of politicians who were doing
Mm.
really harmful things, or just outright denying that
Yeah.
climate change is even real, which is
Sure.
just so irresponsible at this point. And we ended up talking to some of their senior leadership about it, and just saying, hey, this would be transformational for our business, but like, we can't work with you until you make more progress on these things, and until you stop making these contributions to organizations that support really harmful industry, or really harmful people who shouldn't be in power.
It's really interesting. It's a really, really powerful way to kind of look at things, because I think, some of us as consumers, right, we don't have the power to sort of do that, right? We have the power to buy from you or not from you, right? But we don't have the power to, change internally what corporations are doing. And I think that's an unbelievable position to be in. Quite honestly, it's really, really important that we all kind of understand where we are in sort of the impact business sort of landscape, where a brand like yours has the power to actually talk to people about this stuff and be listened to, right? And not be, just shoved off, or, I mean, look, I'm sure they're going to say all the right things, but, and that's fine. No company's going to change overnight, right? But I think it's an unbelievable idea that a startup can talk to a big corporation and say, we can totally change our business, and this would be a great business move for us. But it also is like against what we stand for, like the company's sort of foundation, right? And that's a really hard decision to make. I mean, that's a really tough one to make.
Yeah, it continues to be hard too, because
Hmm.
there's this constant balance between the impact of scale, and kind
Right.
of being, it's like, hey, can we be a bigger brand that can kind of move things with that like massive purchasing power, and that sort of thing, or can we be a smaller brand that's enacting kind of this like huge push where people want to work with us, and we're saying, hey, like we're not willing to work with you. And I think part of it is really making sure that people aren't thinking about these things as a zero sum game. And a lot of it has to do with the altitude that you're at as an organization. So even if someone listening is just starting something today, that doesn't mean that you're too small to kind of push back on people, or to ask. Just asking people what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing
Mm-hmm.
helps them think that, oh, this is something that's important. We're still surprised in talking to suppliers that we're consistently told we're the only people that ask about their environmental roadmap. And we're like, well, like we know a bunch of other folks in this space, use you folks as a supplier, and they're sure, doing a song and dance
Right.
about their
Right.
environmental plans to consumers. But within the industry, so few folks are doing it. And so I think people don't realize that it's never too soon to start having those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Mm-hmm.
have those conversations when you're small, as you get bigger, it becomes easier and easier to have those conversations. And in turning down some of these like massive brands and things like that, it may be something where it's setting the table for us to say yes to them in the future, with kind of terms that are better, or that
Mm-hmm.
just them understanding that they also need to be making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these folks, folks who work in big corporations, it's a lot of great people.
Yeah.
People inherently, don't want to destroy the world.
Mm-hmm.
They
No
don't want
doubt.
to
Yeah.
make, they don't want to make your aunt sick. People really like, they don't want to do harm. I think we need to sometimes change how we think about the role of big corporations
Mm-hmm.
in getting us to a place where we can have a healthy planet and healthier communities. And a lot of big companies have tried to, like L'Oreal tried to go completely organic, I think 6 years ago, and they couldn't because there wasn't enough supply of
Yeah.
organic raw goods for them to be
Yeah.
able to do it. And so they started making these investments in smaller brands that could grow the
Yep.
amount of overall raw organic goods. And so sometimes there are things like that going on behind the scenes, but mostly it's worse than people think. And
Mm-hmm.
so everyone should be kind of asking the consumer brands they're in love with, hey, what are you doing on the B2B side?
Yeah, and another thing I think we chatted about before too, before we started recording was, the idea of, I think a lot of brands start, right, especially D2C, right, the sort of direct to consumer brands has sort of exploded the last 5 or so years, and it's really been an amazing thing for a lot of companies, and a lot of Shopify has created an immense company off of it, so supplying the technology to help all these DTC brands grow. And the one thing I thought was really interesting about what you said was, we're not necessarily starting this to get acquired, right? Which I think most sort of CPG brands do. They want to build a brand, build a business and get acquired by a big company. And you said, that's not really our mission. Our mission is to create jobs here in Oakland, right? Like that's kind of what we look at. As we grow, we get to hire more people locally. And I thought that was a really great approach to growth and scale, right? It's not looking at who can acquire us, who can buy us, but it's like, how many jobs could we create locally if more consumers really latch on to what we're doing? We can build something pretty great here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's, I think Henry Ford talked about this a lot, where, getting the price of the Model T down to a place where his workers could buy it was like a really important inflection point for them. And kind of the amount of mobility that brought
Hmm.
to Detroit and to the country at that time, where when you don't treat labor as disposable, and where you give people a living wage, that actually right now in kind of the current in the current capitalist system, like that's really an important piece of the equation. And traveling across the country, it's very clear that a lot of communities have been left behind. And so you can make an amazing product, but if people aren't able to buy it and participate in really like choosing the better product, I think a lot of it, also if you look at like the food system, if people can't buy responsibly grown products that are better for the environment, like we're not going to make process or progress there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so it is really interesting. It's like, hey, like there's this constant tension where a lot of environmentally friendly products have to be expensive
mm, yeah,
right now
yep,
because it's so much to actually use environmentally friendly things. If you're looking at total cost, it's way more expensive.
yeah.
And so,
It's become like a luxury sector, right? That's kind of how I think a lot of people look at it.
yeah, and I think for a lot of people, it can be somewhat performative too, which has its own challenges. And so I think everyone in this space needs to be thinking about like, hey, how are we building for everyone, and how are we creating more opportunity? And so for us, when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about all of these different layers. We're talking about environmental sustainability, but we're also talking about sustainability of our communities and economic sustainability. How can we make sure that we're sustaining a healthy community and not just making ourselves or a few people really wealthy? Like that doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
accomplish much other than some creature comforts for a few people, which is pretty irresponsible at this time in our history.
Usually, I like to end on the future a little bit. I know right now is a little bit crazy, especially in California, but also the United States and around the world. And I know it's a little tough to look at the future, but I like to get an idea of founders' goals and missions as they look towards the future of e-commerce and sustainability. And I think just the world that we play in is business as a means to change a lot of the problems that we want to change. We've seen over the last 50 years or something, we can't depend on governments and charities to do all the work for us, right? I think it's us as business owners, as consumers, we really need to rise up and actually take a stand ourselves. And I think it's really important to notice, as we talked about before, the power that we have, not only as consumers, but you as founders, making, making big corporations really think about what they're doing and not be able to frankly bullshit through their pitches and things like that. So what do you look at like the next 3 to 5 years, for bathing culture? What are some of the goals and missions that you guys want to accomplish?
Yeah, it is really interesting, this question coming out of the year 2020 when we're recording this, because this year for us and so many people we work with has really just been about survival and just surviving, whether you're surviving a pandemic or surviving as a growing business. And so I think it is interesting to like get that opportunity to telescope out and think about that. So thank you, Grant. But I would say we're really excited about the future. I think we have such an abundance mindset where we started about 4 years ago, kind of messing around in Spencer's garage and in my kitchen, coming up with formulas, and we've grown so much since then, and we've seen so many people and so many companies enter the space, not just for environmental sustainability, but for social justice organizations, businesses that are really adding value to their communities. And there's this just huge shift happening in how people think about commerce and the power of what they choose to buy or not buy. And so we're really excited for more and more people to get into the space and to push bigger industry to change. As an organization, we have really ambitious growth plans. We think that there's a huge opportunity in the personal care space, much like in the organic food movement, where that's just continued to pull market share away from
Yeah.
a lot of the environmentally dangerous stuff. And so yeah, there's a lot of great products. We're excited. We've been working on a lot of new stuff. And so people gotta follow at Bathing Culture on Instagram or go to bathingculture.com, and you can definitely follow along and see the stuff we're working on. And we're also excited to provide more transparency to our customers as a kind of barely funded skin of the teeth organization. We haven't really had resources to put into marketing.
Hmm.
It's very much been kind of us doing everything we can as a small crew, and so we want to share more just about some of the stuff we're doing with supply chain, how things are actually made,
Yeah.
and provide that transparency, not just kind of to us, but to other people in the industry as well, so that we can all kind of get a little better.
You said you're excited about sort of, the growth and the future of the company. Is that coming from, do you think that growth comes from e-commerce side, rather direct to consumer, or is it with being in, major grocery stores across the country, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We definitely love like the e-commerce, the relationship that you get with your customer is just completely unrivaled. You know, you
Yeah.
can really know what's going on, what they're liking, what didn't go well, and make adjustments based on that. You know, e-commerce is a huge part of the future. From an environmental perspective, though, I think it is something that everyone needs to slow down around a little bit. Just the amount of shipping that's going on right now
Great
is
point. Yeah.
alarming, and that most of that is not being thought about. And speed, the amount that we're kind of prioritizing speed. Some of the big players, I mean, you know, people will look at Amazon, and we could have a whole another, it's like a whole nother
Sure.
podcast. I'm sure the whole podcast about it. But you know, with you know, they're putting distribution hubs very locally, and they have local delivery drivers, and a lot of e-commerce brands, especially like mid-sized folks, like we're replicating some of that, where we're getting product kind of to different hubs all over the United States, so that the you know, most people are thinking
Sure.
about that from like just the dollars and cents. We're thinking about it from, yeah, you know, how much does that cost us financially, but also what's the total cost? What's the carbon cost of that? Because if we're sending everything out of Oakland or San Francisco, and you know, it's going to New York, suddenly
Right.
that, if someone's flying, you know, you're flying a bottle of soap to New York, that's like crazy. So we're like, okay, like from a carbon perspective, we can't be doing that. Let's make sure we have product just outside of New York in a warehouse that we can get to folks. And that's something that can only come at kind of the scale that we're achieving now. And so there is some improved environmental impact that we can have at a larger scale, which we're excited about. But we're also, you know, cautious about some of these trends and what they mean for the planet.
Thanks so much, Tim. I appreciate you taking the time, man, and tell Spencer keep up the great work as well, and just uh, just keep grinding, man. Keep building the company and the brand, and hope to see bathing culture. You know, maybe I'll be able to go get it in Amsterdam or something in Europe and
Yeah.
stop by, get it at a store or something. We'll see. We'll see. We'll
Yeah, I'm
see.
so I'm so stoked for your move, and I hope everything goes really well. I'll continue to listen to the podcast, and definitely